step into Hercule Mysteries, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot solves baffling cases.
In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Hall, a grand estate steeped in secrets, a brutal murder shatters the veneer of civility. Sir Reginald Thornhill, a collector of ancient treasures, lies dead, struck down by a bronze statuette in his locked study. Who, among the elegant guests, his grieving widow, his restless daughter, a charming barrister, a curious scholar, a cunning journalist, or a mysterious widow and her timid companion, holds the key to his death? A cryptic note signed L, a hidden amulet, a scuff mark in the dark. What do they conceal? Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, whose little grey cells unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and forbidden secrets. Can he expose the killer before another shadow falls? Dive into a classic mystery where every clue counts, every motive hides a twist, and the truth is as shocking as it is inevitable. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Blackthorn Hall. The late summer sun hung low over the rolling hills of Devon, casting a golden glow across the manicured lawns of Blackthorn Hall. The estate, a sprawling Georgian mansion, stood as a monument to old wealth, its ivy-clad walls and tall chimneys exuding an air of timeless dignity. Yet beneath its serene exterior, an undercurrent of unease pulsed through the gathering that had assembled within its oak-panelled halls. It was the kind of unease that Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for human nature, would have detected at once. A faint discord in the polite smiles, a shadow behind the courteous words. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and occasional chronicler, stood at the edge of the drawing room, a glass of sherry in hand, observing the assembled company. The invitation to Blackthorn Hall had come unexpectedly, extended by Sir Reginald Thornhill, a retired diplomat whose reputation for hospitality was matched only by his penchant for collecting rare antiquities. Hastings had accepted out of curiosity, for Sir Reginald's gatherings were famed for their eclectic mix of guests, each, in their way, a figure of intrigue. The drawing-room was a study in elegance. Crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead, their light reflecting off polished mahogany furniture and the delicate porcelain figurines that adorned the mantelpiece. A grand piano stood in one corner, its lid propped open as if awaiting a performance, while tall windows offered a view of the rose gardens beyond. The air carried the faint scent of lavender, mingling with the sharper notes of cigar smoke and perfume. Sir Reginald himself presided over the gathering with the air of a benevolent monarch. A tall man in his late 60s, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed moustache, he moved among his guests with practiced ease, his voice resonant with the cadence of a man accustomed to command. "My dear friends," he said, raising a glass, "to new acquaintances and old secrets, may they both enrich our weekend." The toast was met with polite laughter, though. Hastings noted that not all the smiles reached the eyes. To Sir Reginald's left stood his wife, Lady Eleanor Thornhill, a striking woman of perhaps 40, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald gown shimmered in the candlelight, but her expression was guarded, her gaze flitting nervously toward the door. Beside her was their daughter, Miss Clara Thornhill, a young woman of 22, whose delicate beauty was marred by a certain restlessness. She toyed with a pearl necklace, her fingers betraying a tension that her serene smile could not mask. Across the room, Dr. Maurice Langston, a retired physician with a penchant for archaeology, was deep in conversation with Mr. Victor Crane, a sharp-eyed journalist whose articles on high society had earned him both fame and enemies. Crane's thin lips curled into a sardonic smile as he spoke, his words too low for Hastings to catch. Nearby, Mrs. Beatrice Langley, a widow of considerable wealth, sipped her sherry with an air of detached amusement, her keen eyes missing nothing. Her companion, Miss Evelyn Carter, a governess-turned-secretary, hovered at her side, her plain grey dress a stark contrast to the opulence around her. The final guest, Mr. Julian Warrender, lounged by the fireplace, his handsome features lit by the flickering flames. A barrister by trade, his reputation for charm
was matched only by his rumoured fondness for gambling. He caught Hastings' eye and raised his glass in a mock salute, his smile carrying a hint of mischief. As the clock on the mantel struck 7, a butler appeared to announce dinner. The guests filed into the dining room, where a long table gleamed with silver and crystal. The meals exquisite: roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a velvety claret. But Hastings found his attention drawn less to the food than to the dynamics at play. Sir Reginald dominated the conversation, regaling the group with tales of his diplomatic postings in Cairo and Istanbul, while Lady Eleanor offered only occasional strained remarks. Clara, seated beside Warrender, seemed to hang on his every word, though her eyes darted toward her mother with a flicker of unease. Dr. Langston, ever the enthusiast, spoke at length about a recent excavation in Egypt, his hands animated as he described a newly discovered tomb.
"The artifacts, my dear Hastings," he said, turning to him, "are unlike anything I've seen. Golden amulets, alabaster vases, and a curious statuette of Anubis. Sir Reginald has promised to show us his own collection tomorrow." "Indeed," Sir Reginald said, his tone jovial, but his eyes sharp. "My study holds treasures that would make even the British Museum envious." Crane, ever the provocateur, leaned forward. "And do these treasures come with stories, Sir Reginald? Or perhaps secrets?" The table fell silent for a moment.
Smoothly.
"Every artifact has a tale, Mr. Crane. The trick is knowing which ones are worth telling." Hastings, attuned to such nuances, noted the fleeting glances exchanged among the guests. Mrs. Langley's lips twitched as if suppressing a smile, while Miss Carter's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass. Warrender, meanwhile, seemed to find the exchange amusing, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. As the meal drew to a close, Sir Reginald rose, proposing a final toast. "To Blackthorn Hall," he said, "and to the mysteries we uncover together." The words were innocuous, yet Hastings felt a chill, as if the very walls of the mansion were listening. The evening continued with coffee in the drawing room, where Clara played a haunting piece on the piano, her fingers coaxing melancholy notes from the keys. Hastings, standing by the window, caught sight of a figure moving in the garden, a groundskeeper perhaps, though the hour was late. As the guests began to retire, Sir Reginald invited Hastings to join him in his study for a nightcap. The room was a treasure trove of antiquities, shelves lined with ancient texts, a glass case displaying a golden scarab, and a locked cabinet that drew Hastings' eye. "A precaution," Sir Reginald said, noting his interest. "Some things are too valuable to leave unguarded." They spoke briefly of Poirot, whom Sir Reginald had met years ago in Brussels. "A remarkable man," he said. "I trust he's well?" "Very well," Hastings replied, though he wondered why Sir Reginald had not invited Poirot himself. The omission felt deliberate, though he could not say why. As Hastings made his way to his room, the house seemed to settle into an uneasy silence. He paused at the top of the staircase, glancing down the dimly lit corridor. A door creaked open, and Miss Carter emerged, her face pale in the lamplight. She started at the sight of him, then hurried away without a word. Sleep did not come easily that night. Hastings lay awake, replaying the evening's conversations, the subtle tensions, the unspoken rivalries. Blackthorn Hall, for all its grandeur, felt like a stage set for a drama yet to unfold. He thought of Poirot, wishing his friend were here to unravel the threads of unease that seemed to weave through the house. Unbeknownst to Hastings, far away in London, Hercule Poirot was preparing to board a train to Devon. A cryptic telegram from Sir Reginald, sent that very afternoon, had piqued his curiosity. Urgent, Blackthorn Hall, discretion required. Poirot, ever attuned to the call of mystery, had packed his valise and adjusted his moustache with a gleam in his eye. The little grey cells, he knew, would soon be put to work, as the clock that would test even the great detective's formidable intellect. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Hall, casting long, slanting rays across the polished floors. The house, which had seemed so grand and inviting the previous evening, now carried an air of stillness, as if holding its breath. Captain Arthur Hastings rose early, his military habits unbroken despite the luxurious surroundings. He dressed with care, noting the faint chill in the air, and descended to the breakfast room, where a buffet of kedgeree, toast, and marmalade awaited. The guests gathered slowly, their faces betraying the uneven sleep of a night spent in unfamiliar beds. Sir Reginald Thornhill was absent, a fact remarked upon by Mrs. Beatrice Langley as she buttered her toast. "Our host is usually so punctual," she said, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. "I do hope he hasn't been detained by some urgent matter." Lady Eleanor, seated at the head of the table, offered a strained smile. "Reginald often rises early to work in his study," she said, though her fingers tightened around her teacup. "He'll join us soon, I'm sure." Clara Thornhill, pale and subdued, picked at her plate, her gaze fixed on the window. Julian Warrender, by contrast, was in high spirits, regaling Dr. Maurice Langston with a tale of a recent courtroom triumph. Victor Crane, the journalist, sat apart, scribbling in a small notebook, his expression unreadable. Miss Evelyn Carter, ever the shadow to Mrs. Langley, ate in silence, her eyes darting toward the door with every creak of the floorboards. As the meal progressed, a sense of unease began to settle over the group. The butler, a stoic man named Hargreaves, entered to clear the plates, his face betraying nothing. Yet Hastings, ever observant, noted the man's hands tremble slightly as he lifted a tray. "Is Sir Reginald not joining us?" Hastings asked, keeping his tone casual. Hargreaves hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his features. "Sir Reginald instructed that he was not to be disturbed this morning, sir," he replied. "He is in his study, attending to important matters." The answer satisfied no one, least of all Hastings, whose instincts, honed by years at Poirot's side, prickled with suspicion. He excused himself and stepped into the hall, intending to take a turn in the garden to clear his mind. As he passed the foot of the grand staircase, he heard a muffled cry, a sharp, stifled sound that seemed to come from the direction of Sir Reginald's study. Hastings froze, his heart quickening. The house was large, its corridors labyrinthine, but he retraced his steps, guided by memory. The study door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. He approached cautiously, slumped over his desk, his silver hair matted with blood. A heavy bronze statuette, shaped like an Egyptian falcon, lay beside him, its base stained crimson. The room was in disarray, papers scattered, a chair overturned, and the locked cabinet Hastings had noticed the previous night now stood open, its contents seemingly untouched. Hastings' military training took over. He checked for a pulse, finding none, and noted the coldness of the body. Sir Reginald had been dead for some hours, likely since the early morning. The window was latched, the room sealed save for the door through which Hastings had entered. He stepped back, careful not to disturb the scene, and called for Hargreaves. The butler's composure shattered at the sight of his master. "Good God," he whispered, his face ashen. "What's happened?" "We must summon the police," Hastings said, his voice steady despite the shock. "And no one is to enter this room until they arrive." The household descended into chaos. Lady Eleanor collapsed in tears, supported by Clara, whose own face was a mask of horror. Mrs. Langley took charge with surprising calm, directing the maids to prepare tea, while Dr. Langston insisted on examining the body, confirming what Hastings already knew. Sir Reginald had been struck with a single, fatal blow to the head. As the local constable, a dour man named Inspector Grayson, arrived to secure the scene, Hastings sent a telegram to Poirot, urging his friend to come at once. The police, though competent, lacked the finesse required for a case that already felt layered with deception. By midday, the guests had been confined to the drawing room, their alibis requested and their movements scrutinized. It was then that Hercule Poirot arrived, stepping from a hired car with his usual impeccable poise. His small, neat figure, clad in a perfectly tailored suit, seemed almost incongruous against the somber backdrop of Blackthorn Hall. His moustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed in the sunlight, and his green eyes sparkled with curiosity as he greeted Hastings. "Mon ami," Poirot said, clasping Hastings' hand. "You have a talent for finding yourself in the midst of tragedy. Tell me everything." Hastings recounted the events. The dinner, the uneasy atmosphere, Sir Reginald's absence at breakfast, and the grim discovery in the study. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. "A locked cabinet, you say?" he murmured. "And it was open when you found him? Most interesting." Inspector Grayson, a man of blunt manners and limited imagination, joined them, outlining distraction, perhaps. "We must look to the people, not the objects." He requested to see the body, and Grayson, though skeptical of the fancy foreign detective, complied. Poirot examined the scene with meticulous care, noting the position of the statuette, the angle of the wound, and the scattered papers. He paused by the open cabinet, his gloved fingers tracing the lock. "Curious," he murmured. "The damage is superficial. This lock was opened with a key, not forced." Hastings watched, marveling at Poirot's ability to see what others missed. "You think the killer had access to the key?" he asked. "Précisément," Poirot replied. "And that, mon ami, narrows our circle considerably." The guests were summoned to the drawing room, where Poirot began his inquiries. Lady Eleanor, still shaken, claimed to have retired early, hearing nothing unusual. Clara, trembling, said she had been in her room, reading. Warrender admitted to a late-night walk in the garden, alone. Dr. Langston had been in the library, studying Sir Reginald's collection of manuscripts. Crane, with a smirk, said he'd been writing in his room, though he offered no proof. Mrs. Langley and Miss Carter claimed to have been together, playing cards until midnight. Each alibi was plausible, yet Poirot's eyes gleamed as he listened, as if hearing not just the words, but the silences between them. He asked seemingly trivial questions: the exact time of Clara's bedtime, the brand of Warrender's cigar, the title of Langston's manuscript. To Hastings, these seemed irrelevant, but he knew better than to question Poirot's methods. As the interviews concluded, Poirot stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice soft but commanding, "a crime has been committed, and the truth lies not in what you say, but in what you do not say. Hercule Poirot will find that truth, rest assured." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, their secrets stirring like shadows in the candlelight. Hastings, watching them, felt a chill. The killer was among them, hidden in plain sight, and only Poirot's little grey cells could unmask them. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Blackthorn Hall, casting intricate patterns on the Persian rugs of the drawing room. The air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish,
but an oppressive tension overlaid the elegance, as if the very walls were complicit in the morning's tragedy. The guests, confined to the room under Inspector Grayson's orders, sat in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of suppressed emotions: grief, fear, suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the grand piano, watched the fireplace, his small, neat figure commanding the room's attention without effort. He held a silver cigarette case, though he did not smoke, using it instead as a prop to punctuate his thoughts with precise gestures. "Mes amis," he began, his voice soft yet resonant. "A crime has been committed, and it is no ordinary crime. Sir Reginald Thornhill, a man of wealth, influence, and secrets, lies dead. To find his killer, we must look not to the chaos of the moment, but to the order beneath it. The truth, it is always there, in the details." Inspector Grayson, standing by the door with a notebook in hand, snorted softly. "Details, Mr. Poirot. A man's been bashed over the head with a statuette. Seems straightforward enough to me." Poirot's green eyes twinkled with polite amusement. "Straightforward, Inspector? No, no. The blow to the head, it is but the final act. The story begins much earlier, in the hearts and minds of those present. Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. He follows the light of reason." Hastings suppressed a smile, knowing Grayson's skepticism would only fuel Poirot's determination. The detective turned to the assembled guests, his gaze lingering on each in turn. Lady Eleanor Thornhill sat rigidly, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. Clara Thornhill beside her seemed to shrink into herself, her delicate features pale against her dark dress. Julian Warrender leaned casually against the arm of a sofa, though his fingers drummed a restless rhythm. Dr. Maurice Langston, his face lined with fatigue, adjusted his spectacles nervously. Victor Crane, the journalist, watched Poirot with a predator's intensity, his pen poised over his notebook. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, composed and regal, met Poirot's gaze with a faint, enigmatic smile, while Miss Evelyn Carter, her companion, kept her eyes fixed on the floor. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot said, turning to his friend, "you were the first to discover the body, n'est-ce pas? Describe for me, if you please, the scene in the study." Hastings cleared his throat, aware of the eyes upon him. "It was just after breakfast, around 9 o'clock. I heard a cry, muffled but distinct, coming from the direction of Sir Reginald's study. When I entered, I found him slumped over his desk, a bronze statuette beside him, stained with blood. The room was in disarray, papers scattered, a chair overturned. The cabinet, which Sir Reginald had described as locked, was open." Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping the cigarette case. "And the window? The door?" A glass of brandy in the study. He was alone, going through his papers. He seemed preoccupied. "Preoccupied, you say?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were sharp. "In what way?" "He was muttering to himself, sir, about a letter he'd received. He didn't say what it was about, only that it was troublesome. I left him and locked the front doors for the night as usual." Poirot's gaze shifted to the guests. "A letter," he mused. "Did anyone here correspond with Sir Reginald recently? A matter of business, perhaps, or something more personal?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Lady Eleanor's lips parted, but she said nothing. Warrender's drumming fingers stilled, and Crane's pen scratched a quick note. Mrs. Langley raised an eyebrow, her voice cool. "Really, Mr. Poirot,
You can't expect us to recall every piece of correspondence. Sir Reginald was a busy man. Indeed, madame, Poirot said, bowing slightly. But it is the little things, the letters, the glances, the silences that reveal the truth. Let us proceed methodically. I would like each of you to account for your movements between 11 last night and 9 this morning.
The alibis came haltingly, each guest aware of the scrutiny they faced. Lady Eleanor repeated that she had retired at 10, exhausted from the evening. Clara claimed to have been in her room reading a novel until midnight. Warrender, with a wry smile, said he'd taken a walk in the garden until 11:30, enjoying the moonlight. Dr. Langston had remained in the library until nearly 1, absorbed in a manuscript on Egyptian funerary rites. Crane, ever evasive, said he'd been writing in his room, though he admitted to stepping onto the balcony for air around midnight. Mrs. Langley and Miss Carter vouched for each other, claiming to have played cards in the former's room until 12:30. Poirot listened, his expression unreadable, though Hastings caught the faintest twitch of his moustache, a sign that his friend was piecing together a puzzle. When the alibis were complete, Poirot paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back.
Most interesting, he said. Each of you claims to have been alone, or with one other. Yet, no one saw Sir Reginald after 11, and yet someone entered his study, struck him with the statuette, and opened the cabinet. Why, I wonder? To take something? Or to make us believe something was taken?
Inspector Grayson interrupted, his patience thinning. The cabinet's lock was forced, Mr. Poirot. That's evidence enough of a thief. Warrender's eyes narrowed. Poirot continued, undeterred. I will examine the study again, and I ask that no one leave the house until I have done so. The truth, it is like a delicate thread. It must be handled with care. With Grayson's grudging permission, Poirot and Hastings returned to the study. The body had been removed, but the scene remained largely untouched. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, examining the desk, the statuette, and the scattered papers. He paused over a single sheet, half buried beneath others, bearing a few handwritten lines. Reginald, you must reconsider. The consequences are grave. L. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A clue, Hastings. This letter. It is not what it seems. He turned to the cabinet, its glass doors revealing a collection of artifacts. A golden scarab, a jade figurine, a small alabaster vase. Nothing is missing, Poirot murmured. Yet the killer wished us to think otherwise. Why? Hastings, struggling to keep up, ventured a guess. Perhaps the killer wanted to distract us from the real motive. Something personal? Poirot nodded. Précisément. The murder. It is not about wealth, but about secrets. And secrets, mon ami, are the currency of this house. As they left the study, Poirot paused in the corridor, his gaze falling on a small table bearing a vase of roses. One petal lay on the floor, slightly crushed. Curious, he said, picking it up. This petal. It was not here this morning. Someone has passed this way, perhaps in haste. Hastings felt a chill, the weight of Poirot's words settling over him. The killer was close, their presence lingering in the shadows of Blackthorn Hall. As the day waned, Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, untangling the threads of a mystery that promised to be as intricate as it was deadly. The interrogations begin. The afternoon deepened over Blackthorn Hall, the sky outside turning a sullen grey as clouds gathered over the Devon hills. Inside, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, the drawing room a stage for suppressed anxieties and guarded glances. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gloom, had arranged for a series of private interviews in the library, a room lined with leather-bound tomes and dominated by a heavy oak table. The library's high windows admitted only slivers of light, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the secrets lurking within the house. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the door, his role as Poirot's confidant granting him a front-row seat to the detective's methodical unravelling of the mystery. Poirot sat at the table, a small notebook open before him, his pen poised with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel.
The first to enter was Lady Eleanor Thornhill, her auburn hair slightly dishevelled, her composure fraying like a worn tapestry. She sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Poirot began gently, his voice a soothing contrast to the tension in the room. "Madame, you have suffered a great loss. Tell me, if you please, of your husband's state of mind in recent days. Was he troubled?" Lady Eleanor's lips trembled, but her voice was steady.
"Reginald was always busy, Mr. Poirot. His collections, his correspondence, he thrived on it. But yes, he was distracted of late. He mentioned a letter, something that worried him, but he wouldn't share details. He never did, not with me."
Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "This letter, madame, did he say who sent it, or what it concerned?"
"No," she replied, too quickly. "He only said it was a nuisance. I assumed it was some business matter, an artifact he wanted perhaps."
Poirot made a note, his pen scratching softly. "And last night, after dinner, you retired at 10, oui? You heard nothing unusual? No footsteps? No voices?"
"Nothing," she said, her eyes flickering to the window. "I was exhausted. I took a sleeping draught and went to bed."
Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. That will be all for now." As Lady Eleanor left, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see how she avoided your eyes?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The eyes, Hastings, they are the windows to the soul, and hers, they are shattered." Next came Clara Thornhill, her delicate frame swathed in a black shawl, her eyes red from crying. She sat hesitantly, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. Poirot's tone softened further, almost paternal. "Mademoiselle, your father's death is a tragedy. You were close to him, yes?" Clara nodded, her voice barely audible.
"He was everything to me. He taught me about history, about his artifacts. But he was strict, Mr. Poirot. He didn't always approve of my choices."
"Choices?" Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Such as your friendships, perhaps? Or your interest in Monsieur Warrender?" Clara's cheeks flushed, and she looked away.
"Father thought Julian, Mr. Warrender, was unsuitable. He said barristers were too charming for their own good. But I was in my room last night reading. I didn't see Father after dinner."
Poirot's pen paused. "And this book, mademoiselle?"
Small, but it is significant. Why does she feel the need to conceal her actions? Julian Warrender entered next, his easy charm undimmed by the morning's event. He lounged in the chair, one leg crossed over the other, his smile almost defiant. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "I've no doubt you'll have this sorted in no time. What do you want to know?"
"Your walk in the garden last night," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. It was late, no? And the air, it was chilly. Why choose such a time for a stroll? Warrender shrugged. I like the night air. Clears the head. I wandered the rose garden, smoked a cigar, and came back around 11:30. Saw no one, heard nothing. And your cigar, Poirot said. It was of what brand? Warrender blinked, caught off guard. Partagase, I believe. Why does it matter? Poirot smiled enigmatically. Everything matters, monsieur. One last question. Your relationship with Mademoiselle Clara. It was a source of tension with Sir Reginald, yes? Warrender's smile tightened. He didn't approve, if that's what you mean. Thought I was after his money, I suppose. But Clara and we're fond of each other. Nothing more. As Warrender left, Poirot made a note, muttering, Fond, he says, but the heart, it is a dangerous thing. Dr. Maurice Langston followed, his scholarly demeanour tinged with nervousness. He adjusted his spectacles repeatedly as he spoke of his time in the library, studying a manuscript on Egyptian burial practices. It was fascinating, he said, his enthusiasm genuine. Sir Reginald's collection is unparalleled. I lost track of time, stayed until nearly 1. And you saw no one? Poirot asked. Heard nothing unusual? Langston shook his head. The house was quiet. I was absorbed in my reading. Poirot's gaze lingered on the doctor's hands, which trembled slightly. And your interest in Sir Reginald's artifacts, did it ever lead to disagreements? Langston stiffened. Disagreements? No. We shared a passion for antiquities. He was generous with his knowledge. Victor Crane was next, his sharp eyes glinting with calculation. He admitted to writing in his room, stepping onto the balcony for air around midnight. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, he said, his tone clipped. Just the gardens, the stars. No mysterious figures skulking about, if that's what you're after. Poirot's smile was thin. And your notebook, Monsieur Crane, what do you write in it so diligently? Crane's expression hardened. Observations. It's my job to notice things. Sir Reginald was a man with enemies. His wealth, his artifacts, his secrets. I was planning an article on him. An article, Poirot mused. Flattering? Langley was composed, her voice cool and measured, as she described their card game, which ended at 12:30. Miss Carter, pale and nervous, nodded in agreement, her eyes fixed on her employer. We were together the whole time, Mrs. Langley said. Evelyn can confirm it. Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Carter. And you, mademoiselle? You saw nothing, heard nothing that might aid us? Miss Carter's voice was barely a whisper. No, sir. Just the cards. And Mrs. Langley. As they left, Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Each tells a story, Hastings, but not the whole story. The alibis, they are too neat, too convenient. And yet, there are contradictions, small but significant. Hastings frowned. What contradictions? They all seem plausible. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The petal, Hastings. The crushed petal in the corridor. It was not there when you found the body, yet it appeared later. Someone moved through the house after the murder, perhaps to cover their tracks. And the letter, L. It could be Lady Eleanor, or Langston, or even Langley. We must look deeper. He rose, adjusting his tie. Come, mon ami. Let us return to the study, the scene of the crime. It holds more secrets yet. As they left the library, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing down. Poirot's questions had stirred the surface, but the depths remained murky, hiding a truth that only his little grey cells could illuminate. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The late afternoon light cast a pall over Blackthorn Hall, the grey clouds outside mirroring the growing unease within. The library where Hercule Poirot had conducted his interviews now felt like a stage where the players had left their masks slightly askew. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the window, watched the wind stir the rose garden, his mind replaying Poirot's probing questions. The detective's ability to uncover hidden truths was uncanny, yet the guests' alibis, though plausible, seemed to weave a web of half-truths that only deepened the mystery. Poirot, seated at the oak table, closed his notebook with a deliberate snap. "Hastings," he said, his voice low but resonant, "we are surrounded by red herrings. The killer wishes us to chase shadows, to focus on the open cabinet, the scattered papers, the obvious. But Hercule Poirot, he does not chase shadows. He seeks the light of truth." Before Hastings could respond, Inspector Grayson burst into the room, his face flushed with self-important urgency. "Mr. Poirot, we
Was placed there to mislead us. But let us see where this red herring leads."
Grayson bristled, clearly annoyed by Poirot's dismissal, but led them back to the study. The room, still cordoned off, was as Hastings had first seen it. The desk strewn with papers, the bronze falcon statuette now in police custody, the cabinet standing open with its artifacts untouched. Poirot examined the key's hiding place, crouching to inspect the rug. "Interesting," he murmured. "The dust beneath the rug is undisturbed, save for this one spot. The key was placed recently, perhaps this morning." Hastings frowned. "You mean after the murder? But why?" Poirot rose, brushing his hands. "To distract, mon ami. The killer wishes us to believe in a thief, but the true motive lies elsewhere. Let us consider the guests anew, for one among them is playing a clever game." Back in the drawing room, the guests had grown restless, their polite facades fraying under the strain of confinement. Lady Eleanor sat by the fire, her face pale, while Clara clutched her hand, her eyes darting nervously. Julian Warrender paced near the piano, his earlier charm replaced by a restless energy. Dr. Maurice Langston, engrossed in a book, looked up only when addressed, his spectacles glinting. Victor Crane scribbled in his notebook, his sharp gaze missing nothing. Mrs. Beatrice Langley sipped tea with an air of detached amusement, while Miss Evelyn Carter hovered at her side, her hands twisting in her lap. Poirot addressed the group, his tone calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a key has been found, hidden in the study. It fits the cabinet, yet nothing was taken. This suggests a purpose beyond theft. I ask again, did anyone see or hear anything unusual last night, however small?" A tense silence followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, Miss Carter spoke, her voice trembling. I saw something," she said, glancing nervously at Mrs. Langley. "Around midnight, when we were playing cards, I stepped onto the balcony for air. I saw a figure in the garden, a man, I think, near the rose trellis. It was too dark to be sure who it was." Warrender's head snapped up. "A figure? You're sure it was a man?" Miss Carter nodded, her cheeks flushing. "I think so. He was tall and he moved quickly toward the house." All eyes turned to Warrender, who had claimed to be walking in the garden at that hour. He laughed, though it sounded forced. "Well, that could have been me, I suppose. I told you I was out there, enjoying the moonlight. Nothing sinister about it." Poirot's gaze was piercing. "And yet, Monsieur Warrender, you said you saw no one," at Mrs. Langley, who gave a slight nod. "Yes, midnight. I checked my watch." The room buzzed with murmurs, and Inspector Grayson seized the moment.
Sounds like we've got our man, he said, glaring at Warrender. You were in the garden, near the house, at the time of the murder. Care to explain yourself?
Warrender's face darkened. Explain? I've done nothing wrong. I was walking, that's all. You can't pin this on me based on a glimpse in the dark.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room.
Calm, if you please. Mademoiselle Carter's observation is valuable, but it is not proof. We must consider all possibilities. Monsieur Crane, you two were on your balcony around midnight. Did you see this figure?
Crane's eyes narrowed, his pen pausing. I didn't see anyone, he said curtly. The garden was empty, far as I could tell. Another murmur rippled through the group. Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile.
So, we have a figure seen by one, but not by another, at the same hour. Most interesting. Let us return to the study, Hastings. There is more to learn.
In the study, Poirot's attention turned to the scattered papers on the desk. Among them, he found a ledger detailing Sir Reginald's recent acquisitions, a list of artifacts, including a rare amulet described as cursed by its seller. Poirot's eyes gleamed.
A curse, Hastings? No, I do not believe in such things, but I do believe in motives. This amulet, where is it?
A search of the cabinet revealed no amulet, though the ledger suggested it had been stored there. Stolen after all? Hastings asked. Poirot shook his head.
Or hidden, to make us believe in theft. The killer is clever, Hastings, but not cleverer than Poirot.
As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot paused in the corridor, his gaze falling on a small vase of roses, identical to the one where he'd found the crushed petal.
The roses, he murmured. They are everywhere in this house, yet they tell a story. This petal, it was crushed by someone in haste. But who?
The guests were growing agitated, their alibis now under scrutiny. Grayson, convinced of Warrender's guilt, pressed him further, but Poirot intervened.
Monsieur Warrender is a suspect, oui, but so is everyone. The key, the figure in the garden, these are distractions. The true clue lies in the letter signed L. We must find its author.
Lady Eleanor stiffened at the mention of the letter, her hand tightening on Clara's. Dr. Langston adjusted his spectacles, his face pale. Mrs. Langley's smile remained, but her eyes were cold. Hastings watched.
Servants, Hastings, he said privately. They see everything, yet are often unseen. They will tell us what the guests will not.
The day closed with the guests confined to their rooms, Grayson's men patrolling the grounds. Poirot, undeterred by the mounting tension, retired to the library, his notebook open once more.
The red herrings, they multiply, he told Hastings, his voice tinged with satisfaction. But the truth, it cannot hide forever. Tomorrow, mon ami, we will find the next thread in this tapestry of deception.
Hastings nodded, though the web of clues seemed only to tighten. The killer was among them, their tracks covered by lies and misdirection. But Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, sifting through the shadows to uncover the light of truth. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Blackthorn Hall, casting a muted glow across the estate. The grandeur of the mansion seemed diminished, as if the very stones mourned Sir Reginald Thornhill's death. Inside, the atmosphere was taut, the guests' nerves frayed by confinement and suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the hall, felt the weight of the mystery pressing down, each clue a puzzle piece that refused to fit. Hercule Poirot, however, remained unruffled, his meticulous nature thriving in the chaos of deception. Poirot had requested a private meeting with the household staff in the servants' hall, a modest room below stairs, where the air smelled of polish and damp linen. Hastings stood by, watching as Poirot addressed Hargreaves, the butler, and the maids, his tone gentle but probing. "You are the eyes and ears of this house," Poirot said, his green eyes scanning the nervous faces. "You see what the guests do not wish seen. Tell me, what did you observe last night?" Hargreaves, still shaken by his master's death, spoke first. "I told you, sir, I saw Sir Reginald at 11, when I brought his brandy. He was in his study, looking at papers. I left him and locked the house as usual. I heard nothing after that." Poirot's gaze lingered on the butler's hands, which trembled slightly. "And these papers, Monsieur Hargreaves, did you see what they were?" "No, sir," Hargreaves replied, his voice steady but his eyes averted. He was always private about his work. "I didn't look." Poirot nodded, turning to a young maid, Elsie, whose freckled face was pale with fear. "And you, mademoiselle? Did you see or hear anything unusual after 11? Elsie hesitated, glancing at Hargreaves. I was tidying the drawing room, sir, around 11:30. I heard footsteps in the corridor, heavy ones, like a man's. I thought it was Mr. Warrender, coming in from the garden, but I didn't see him." Poirot's bed. The other maids had little to add, their routines confined to the kitchens and upper floors. Poirot thanked them, his expression thoughtful, as he led Hastings back to the main house. "The footsteps, Hastings," he murmured. "They are a detail most precise. They confirm movement in the house, yet Monsieur Warrender claims he saw no one. We must look closer." In the study, Poirot's attention turned to the smallest details, his movements methodical as he examined the scene anew. The desk, still cluttered with papers, held his focus. Among the scattered documents, he found a small, crumpled note tucked beneath a blotter. It was written in a hurried hand. "Meet me at midnight, urgent, L." Poirot held it up, his lips twitching in a faint smile. "Another letter, Hastings. The same initial as before. This L is most persistent." Hastings peered at the note, his brow furrowing. "It's different handwriting from the other letter, isn't it? Could there be 2 L's? Poirot nodded. "Possible, mon ami, but unlikely. The handwriting, it can be disguised. This note, it was meant to be found, perhaps to mislead. But it tells us something vital. Sir Reginald had a rendezvous planned, one he did not survive." Poirot's gaze shifted to the floor, where a faint scuff mark marred the polished wood near the desk. He crouched, his gloved fingers tracing the mark. "Regardez, Hastings. This mark, it is fresh, made by a shoe with a distinct heel. Not Sir Reginald's, for his shoes were polished and unmarred. Someone stood here, perhaps watching him, before the blow was struck." Hastings frowned. "But how does that help? Anyone could have stood there." Poirot rose, his eyes gleaming. "Not anyone, Hastings. The mark is deep, made by a heavy step, a man, perhaps, or a woman in haste. And it is near the desk where the statuette was taken. The killer was close, intimate even. This was no stranger's crime." They moved to the cabinet, its glass doors still open, the artifacts untouched. Poirot examined the lock again, his fingers probing the scratches. "As I thought," he said, "the key found by Inspector Grayson, it fits, but it was not used. The scratches are superficial, a ruse. The cabinet was opened with another key, one Sir Reginald trusted someone to have." Hastings' mind raced. So the killer had access to the study's secrets. Lady Eleanor? Dr. Langston? Someone close to him? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "All are possible, Hastings, but we must consider the timing. The note says midnight, yet Hargreaves saw Sir Reginald alive at 11. Elsie heard footsteps at 11:30. The killer acted swiftly between 11 and midnight." Signed, L. I ask again,
Who among you wrote to him? The room tensed. Lady Eleanor's face drained of colour, her hand clutching Clara's. "I wrote no such note," she said, her voice sharp. "Reginald received many letters. It could be anyone." Dr. Langston cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. I sent him a letter last week about an artifact, but it wasn't urgent, and I didn't sign it L." Mrs. Beatrice Langley's eyes narrowed. "Really, Mr. Poirot, this is becoming theatrical. Are we to be accused based on a single letter?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "Not accused, madame, but observed. The truth, it hides in the details. A scuff mark, a crushed petal, a note. And Hercule Poirot, he sees all." Julian Warrender, his charm fraying, spoke up. "This is absurd. You're chasing ghosts, Poirot. I was in the garden, as I said. I didn't write any note." Victor Crane, silent until now, smirked. "Perhaps you should ask Miss Carter. She saw a figure in the garden. Maybe she saw more than she's letting on." Miss Carter flinched, her eyes darting to Mrs. Langley, who placed a calming hand on her arm. "Evelyn has told you what she saw?" Mrs. Langley said coolly. "Accusing her won't bring Sir Reginald back." Poirot's eyes flickered between them, his mind clearly at work. "Merci," he said. "You have all been most cooperative. But the details, they do not lie. The footsteps, the note, the key, they point to a truth we are close to uncovering." As the guests dispersed, Hastings pulled Poirot aside. "That scuff mark, the note, it's all so specific, yet it doesn't point to anyone clearly. Are we any closer?" Poirot's smile was serene. "We are closer, mon ami, because we have eliminated the impossible. The killer is among us, and they have made a mistake. The scuff mark, it is not random, it matches a shoe, and I will find its owner. The note, it is a beacon, guiding us to the motive." He paused, his gaze distant. "Tonight, Hastings, we will watch. The killer, they will grow nervous, and when they do, they will reveal themselves, even if only in a glance." As evening fell, Blackthorn Hall seemed to close in on itself, the shadows deepening in the corridors. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. Hastings, watching his friend, felt a familiar mix of frustration and awe. The clue in the scuff mark, the note signed L. They were small, but in Poirot's hands, they were threads in a tapestry of deception, leading inexorably to the truth.
Cage, its occupants trapped by suspicion and the weight of their own secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated near the grand piano, watched the group with growing unease, sensing that the facade of civility was crumbling. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, neat figure commanding the room despite the tension. His green eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the faces before him. Lady Eleanor, rigid with suppressed grief. Clara, pale and trembling. Julian Warrender, his charm now tinged with defiance. Dr. Maurice Langston, fidgeting with his spectacles. Victor Crane, scribbling in his notebook with predatory focus. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, serene yet watchful. And Miss Evelyn Carter, her nervous glances betraying her discomfort. The discovery of the note, signed L, and the scuff mark in the study had stirred the waters, and Poirot was determined to see what would rise to the surface. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "The threads of this mystery tighten. A note, a scuff mark, a key, they are not accidents. They are signs of a mind at work, a mind that seeks to deceive. But Hercule Poirot,
He is not so easily deceived. I ask you now to consider, what did Sir Reginald know that made him a danger? What secret drove someone to kill? A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's hand tightened on her armrest, her voice sharp. "This is intolerable, Mr. Poirot. My husband is dead, and you speak of secrets as if he were some criminal." Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic but unyielding. "Madame, I do not accuse Sir Reginald. I seek only to understand why he was killed. The note signed L. It suggests a meeting, a confrontation. Did he speak to you of any threats, any enemies?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flickered, but she shook her head. "He mentioned nothing specific, only that he was troubled by a letter. I assumed it was about his artifacts, some dispute with a collector, perhaps." Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Langston, whose hands stilled on his spectacles. "Monsieur Langston, you shared Sir Reginald's passion for antiquities. Did he confide in you about such a dispute?" Langston cleared his throat, his voice uneven. He mentioned a disagreement with a dealer in Cairo, a man named Khalid, something about a cursed amulet. But it was months ago. I didn't think it serious." Poirot's lips twitched. "A cursed amulet, you say? The same amulet listed in his ledger, yet missing from the cabinet? Most curious."
Another red herring. The cabinet was opened with a key, not forced, and the amulet's absence is too convenient. The killer wishes us to look outward when the truth lies within this house. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the guests. Clara's voice, barely audible, broke the tension. "Father wasn't killed over some artifact," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. He was worried about something personal. He wouldn't tell me what, but he was different these past weeks, distant, short-tempered." Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle. "Mademoiselle, this distance, did it involve anyone here? A guest, perhaps, or a matter of family?" Clara hesitated, her gaze flickering to Warrender, who sat rigidly, his jaw tight. "He didn't approve of certain friendships," she said softly. "He thought I was too young to make my own choices." Warrender's voice cut in, sharp and defensive. "If you're implying I had anything to do with this, Clara, you're mistaken. I respected your father, even if he didn't care for me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Monsieur Warrender, you were in the garden at midnight, near the time of the murder. Mademoiselle Carter saw a figure, perhaps you. Did you see Sir Reginald? Perhaps through the study window?" Warrender's face reddened. "I told you I was walking. I didn't go near the study, and I certainly didn't kill him." Mrs. Langley's cool voice intervened. "Really, Mr. Poirot, this is becoming a witch hunt. Julian's no more guilty than I am. Perhaps you should ask Mr. Crane about his article. He's been poking into everyone's affairs since he arrived." Crane's smirk faltered, his pen pausing. "My article? It's about Sir Reginald's collection, nothing more. I'm a journalist, not a murderer." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet, Monsieur Crane, you observe so closely. Did you observe Sir Reginald last night? Perhaps a conversation? An argument?" Crane leaned back, his expression guarded. "I saw him at dinner, same as everyone. After that, I was in my room, writing." Poirot turned to Miss Carter, who shrank under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle, you saw a figure in the garden. You are certain it was a man? Could it have been perhaps
A woman in a cloak?
Miss Carter's eyes widened, her voice trembling.
I suppose it could have been. It was dark, and I only saw a shape, but I thought it was a man.
Mrs. Langley's hand rested on Miss Carter's arm, her voice firm. Evelyn's tone was serene. They all lie, Hastings, in their own way. Lady Eleanor hides her fear, Clara her loyalties, Warrender his motives. Langston conceals a connection to the amulet, Crane his true purpose, and Mrs. Langley. She guards Miss Carter too closely, but the lie that matters, it is tied to the note and the scuff mark. We must find the shoe that made it. Poirot led Hastings to the corridor outside the study, where the vase of roses still stood. He knelt, examining the floor anew. "Regardez, Hastings," he said, pointing to a faint smudge near the baseboard. "Another mark, similar to the one in the study. The same heel, perhaps, but fainter. Someone passed this way, not once but twice." Hastings frowned. "Before and after the murder?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "The killer came to the study, struck Sir Reginald, and returned later, perhaps to plant the key or the note. They are clever, but not invisible." Back in the library, Poirot pored over the ledger, noting the entry for the cursed amulet. "This amulet," he murmured. "It is not the motive, but it is a key. Sir Reginald feared it, or what it represented. We must learn its history." As night fell, the storm broke, rain lashing the windows. The guests retired, their faces etched with unease. Poirot, undeterred, sat by the fire, his notebook open. "The lies, Hastings," he said. "They are like the rain, falling everywhere. But soon they will clear. Tomorrow we will find the shoe, and with it the killer's shadow." Hastings nodded, though the web of deception seemed only to tighten. The note, the scuff mark, the missing amulet, each clue pointed to a truth just out of reach, but Poirot's little grey cells were closing in, ready to unravel the lies that bound Blackthorn Hall. His spectacles fogged with nervous perspiration, avoided eye contact. Victor Crane, the journalist, continued to scribble in his notebook, though his sharp gaze darted between the others. Mrs. Beatrice Langley maintained her composed elegance, but her smile was tight, and Miss Evelyn Carter, her shadow, seemed on the verge of collapse, her hands trembling in her lap. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice soft but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we stand at the crossroads in this affair. The clues they accumulate, the note, the scuff mark, the key, the missing amulet.
but they are nothing without the human heart that drives them. Someone in this room knows more than they have said. I ask you now, for the sake of truth, to speak." The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the distant drip of rainwater from the eaves. Then, unexpectedly, Clara Thornhill rose, her voice trembling but resolute.
"I can't bear it any longer,"
she said, her eyes brimming with tears.
"Father, he was hiding something from me, from all of us. I didn't want to believe it, but I heard him arguing the night before he died. It was in the study with someone, a man's voice. I couldn't make out the words, but Father was angry, angrier than I'd ever heard him."
The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Eleanor's face paled, her hand reaching for Clara's.
"Clara, darling, why didn't you tell me?"
she whispered, her voice breaking. Clara shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks.
"I didn't want to believe it was important. I thought it was just a disagreement. But now he's gone, and I can't stop thinking about it."
Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained steady. "Mademoiselle Clara, this is most valuable. The voice, was it one you recognized? Monsieur Warrender, perhaps, or Dr. Langston?" Clara hesitated, her gaze flickering to Warrender, who stiffened.
I'm not sure," she said. "It was muffled through the door. But it wasn't Julian. I know his voice."
Warrender exhaled, his relief palpable. But Poirot's attention shifted to Dr. Langston, who was visibly shaken. "Monsieur Langston," Poirot said, "you were in the library that night, studying manuscripts. Yet Mademoiselle Clara heard an argument in the study. Did you perhaps leave the library to speak with Sir Reginald?" Agitated, said it was a dangerous piece, that it had caused trouble before. I offered to take it off his hands for study, but he refused. That was all. The admission hung in the air, a crack in the wall of lies. Victor Crane's pen scratched furiously, his eyes glinting with interest. "Trouble, you say?" he interjected. "What kind of trouble? Did Sir Reginald think this amulet was worth killing for?" Langston flushed, his voice faltering. "I don't know. He was vague, said it was tied to an old debt. I didn't press him." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "An old debt, monsieur? Most interesting. And this amulet, it is still missing. Perhaps it was not stolen, but hidden by Sir Reginald or by his killer." Mrs. Langley's cool voice cut through the tension. "Really, Mr. Poirot, this is all speculation. You're turning a simple disagreement into a grand conspiracy. Perhaps Dr. Langston is right. Reginald was worried about a business matter. Nothing more." Poirot turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "And you, madame, you are so calm, so certain. Yet you and Mademoiselle Carter were together, playing cards at the time of this argument. Did you hear nothing? No raised voices? No footsteps?" Mrs. Langley's smile was serene, but her eyes were cold. "As I said, we were in my room. The walls are thick, Mr. Poirot. We heard nothing." Miss Carter nodded, her voice barely audible. "Nothing, sir." Poirot's gaze lingered on her, and Hastings saw the faintest flicker of doubt in his friend's eyes. "Very well," Poirot said, "but the truth, it is like a melody. It cannot be silenced forever. Mademoiselle Clara, your courage has brought us closer. Merci. As Clara sat, her mother's arm around her, the room seemed to exhale. Inspector Grayson, hovering by the door, muttered to Hastings, "The girl's story changes things. Langston's our man, mark my words. He was in the study, arguing over that amulet." Hastings shook his head, knowing Poirot's mind worked differently. Langston's hiding something, but Poirot doesn't think it's that simple. There's more to this. Poirot, meanwhile, had stepped into the corridor, beckoning Hastings to follow. "The argument," he said softly. "It is the key. Clara's revelation. It confirms a confrontation, but not the murder. The scuff mark, the note, the amulet, they are pieces of a puzzle, but the heart of it lies in why Sir Reginald was a threat." They returned to the study, where Poirot examined the desk once more. Among
Dangerous. Something tied to this L. The killer silenced him before he could act. Hastings frowned. But who is L? Lady Eleanor? Langston? Or someone else?
Poirot closed the diary, slipping it into his pocket.
That, Hastings, is what we must discover. The emotional turning point. It has revealed a crack in the lies. Now, we press harder.
As they returned to the drawing room, the guests' faces betrayed their unease. Clara's confession had shaken them, exposing fissures in their stories. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, weaving the threads of truth from the tangle of deception. The storm outside had passed, but within Blackthorn Hall, a greater tempest was brewing, one that only Poirot could calm.
Chapter 9. The Trap. The air in Blackthorn Hall was thick with tension as the day waned, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the drawing room's polished floors. The storm's aftermath left the estate cloaked in a damp chill, but it was the growing unease among the guests that truly chilled the atmosphere. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the grand piano, felt the weight of the mystery pressing ever closer, each revelation tightening the noose around the killer's identity. Hercule Poirot, his small figure radiating quiet authority, had orchestrated the moment with the precision of a conductor, ready to draw out the truth through psychological pressure. Poirot had requested that all the guests gather in the drawing room after dinner, a summons that carried the weight of inevitability. The table was cleared, save for a single candelabrum casting flickering light across the faces of the assembled company. Lady Eleanor Thornhill sat rigidly, her eyes hollow with grief and fear. Clara, beside her, clutched her mother's hand, her delicate features strained. Julian Warrender lounged with forced nonchalance, though his fingers betrayed a nervous twitch. Dr. Maurice Langston, his spectacles glinting in the candlelight, shifted uncomfortably. Victor Crane, ever the observer, watched with predatory intensity, his notebook closed but his eyes sharp. Mrs. Beatrice Langley maintained her serene composure, while Miss Evelyn Carter, her companion, seemed on the verge of collapse, her hands trembling in her lap. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes scanning the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but carrying an unmistakable edge. "We have reached a critical moment. The clues, the note signed L, the scuff mark, the missing amulet, the diary, point to a truth that can no longer be hidden. Tonight, Hercule Poirot sets a trap, not with force, but with the power of the little grey cells. One of you knows more than you have said. I invite you now to speak, before the truth speaks for you." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire. Hastings watched the guests, noting the subtle shifts in their postures, Clara's quick glance at Warrender, Langston's nervous adjustment of his spectacles, Crane's faint smirk. Poirot's words hung in the air, a challenge that none seemed eager to meet. Finally, Lady Eleanor spoke, her voice trembling but resolute.
Mr. Poirot, this is cruel. You accuse us all, yet offer no proof. My husband is dead, and you turn our grief into a game. Poirot's expression softened, but his tone remained firm. Madame, it is no game. A man has been murdered, and the killer sits among us. The note signed L. It demanded a meeting at midnight. The diary speaks of a secret Sir Reginald could not keep. The scuff mark tell—
Hello. These are not accusations, they are facts.
He reached into his pocket, producing the small diary found in the study.
This, he said, holding it aloft, contains Sir Reginald's final thoughts. He wrote of L demanding answers, of an amulet that must stay hidden. Who is this L? Lady Eleanor? Dr. Langston? Or perhaps Mrs. Langley?
The room erupted in gasps. Lady Eleanor's face drained of colour, her hand clutching Clara's. "How dare you!" she cried. "I loved my husband. I wrote no such note." Dr. Langston's voice was hoarse. I told you, I wrote to him about the amulet, but it wasn't urgent. I'm not this L you're after." Mrs. Langley's smile was icy.
You're grasping at straws, Mr. Poirot. My name may begin with L, but I had no quarrel with Reginald. This is absurd.
Poirot's gaze shifted to Warrender, whose casual demeanour had vanished.
And you, Monsieur Warrender, you were in the garden at midnight, seen by Mademoiselle Carter. Did you meet Sir Reginald perhaps to discuss his disapproval of your interest in Mademoiselle Clara?
Warrender's jaw tightened, his voice sharp. "I've told you I was walking. I didn't go near the study. You're trying to pin this on me because it's easy." Poirot turned to Miss Carter, his tone gentle but probing.
Mademoiselle, you saw a figure in the garden. You thought it a man, but could it have been a woman, perhaps in a cloak, or did you see more than you have admitted?
Miss Carter's eyes widened, her voice barely audible.
I told you what I saw. A figure, that's all. I don't know who it was.
Mrs. Langley's hand tightened on Miss Carter's arm, her voice cool.
Evelyn is not accustomed to such scrutiny, Mr. Poirot. She's told you all she knows.
Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the gesture.
Perhaps, madame. But the truth, it is like a shadow. It moves when the light shifts. Let us shift the light now.
He stepped forward, producing a small object wrapped in a handkerchief, a woman's shoe, its heel worn and distinctive.
This was found in the guest wing, hidden behind the curtain. Its heel matches the scuff mark in the study. Who among you recognizes it?
The room froze. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and Lady Eleanor's eyes widened. Mrs. Langley's composure faltered for a fraction of a second, while Miss Carter let out a small, involuntary gasp. Warrender and Langston exchanged uneasy glances, and Crane's pen hovered, poised for revelation.
It's mine.
Miss Carter whispered.
You, please. Mademoiselle Carter, explain how your shoe came to be in the study, where a scuff mark marks the killer's presence. Miss Carter's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks.
I was in the corridor that night, near the study. I couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk. I heard a noise, a thud, like something falling. I was frightened and ran back to my room. I didn't see anything, I swear.
Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And the shoe, mademoiselle? Why was it hidden?
I don't know,
she sobbed.
I noticed it was missing this morning. I thought I'd lost it.
Poirot turned to the group, his voice steady. The shoe? It is a clue, but not the whole truth. Mademoiselle Carter was near the study, yes, but her fear suggests she is not the killer. Only a witness, perhaps. The killer, they used this moment to plant the shoe, to cast suspicion on her. But why? He paced slowly, his eyes scanning the faces. The trap? It has sprung. The killer is nervous now, for they see that Hercule Poirot is close. The note, the diary, the amulet. They point to a motive deeper than theft, a secret Sir Reginald died to protect. Tomorrow, we will gather again, and the truth will be revealed. As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Hastings pulled Poirot aside. "That was a master stroke, Poirot, but do you really think Carter's innocent? The shoe is damning." Poirot's smile was serene. "The shoe, Hastings, is another red herring, placed to mislead. The killer is clever, but they have underestimated Poirot. The scuff mark, the note, the diary, they tell a story of betrayal, not theft. We are close, mon ami." The night settled over Blackthorn Hall, the shadows deepening in the corridors. Poirot's trap had shaken the guests, exposing cracks in their stories. As Hastings retired, he felt the mystery's grip tightening, the truth tantalizingly close, but still veiled, waiting for Poirot's final act to unveil it. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning light broke through the clouds over Blackthorn Hall, casting a pale, almost accusing glow across the estate. The grandeur of the mansion seemed to mock the turmoil within, its polished surfaces reflecting the strained faces of the guests gathered once more in the drawing room. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing near the tall windows, felt his pulse quicken, sensing that Hercule
Langston fidgeted with his spectacles, his scholarly demeanour crumbling. Victor Crane's pen was poised, his journalist's instincts sensing a story's climax. Mrs. Beatrice Langley maintained her cool elegance, but her eyes were guarded, while Miss Evelyn Carter, her companion, looked on the verge of collapse, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have journeyed through a labyrinth of lies, red herrings, and half-truths. The note signed L, the scuff mark, the missing amulet, the diary, the shoe, they are threads in a tapestry of deception. But Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, has woven these threads into the truth. Today, I reveal the killer of Sir Reginald Thornhill." A gasp rippled through the room. Inspector Grayson, standing by the door, crossed his arms, his skepticism evident but his curiosity piqued. Hastings leaned forward, his heart pounding, knowing Poirot's flair for the dramatic was matched only by his precision. "Let us begin at the beginning," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "Sir Reginald was found dead in his study, struck by a bronze statuette. The cabinet was open, the amulet missing, a key hidden beneath a rug. The police thought it a robbery gone wrong, but Poirot saw deeper. The lock was opened with a key, not forced. The amulet's absence was a distraction, for nothing else was taken. This was no theft, it was personal." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The note signed L suggested a meeting at midnight. The diary spoke of a secret Sir Reginald could not keep.
Clara heard an argument the night before, and Miss Carter saw a figure in the garden. These clues point to a motive rooted not in wealth, but in betrayal. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor, his tone gentle but firm. Madame, you said your husband was troubled by a letter. You claimed ignorance, yet your fear betrayed you. The diary mentions L demanding answers. Was it you, Lady Eleanor, who wrote the note? Lady Eleanor's face paled, her voice trembling.
No, I loved Reginald. I wrote no note. I told you he was worried about a business matter.
Poirot nodded, turning to Dr. Langston. Monsieur Langston, you admitted to speaking with Sir Reginald about the amulet, a conversation that turned heated. You claimed it was scholarly interest, but the diary suggests a deeper connection. An old debt, perhaps? Langston's spectred
Fantasies. Poirot's gaze settled on Miss Carter, who flinched.
Mademoiselle, your shoe matched the scuff mark in the study. You admitted to being in the corridor, hearing a thud. But was it fear that drove you away, or guilt? Miss Carter's voice broke, tears streaming.
I didn't kill him. I heard the noise and ran. I swear it.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Come, if you please. The truth, it is not in these denials, but in the details. Let us reconstruct the night of the murder. He paced, his voice steady. Sir Reginald was in his study at 11, seen by Hargreaves. At 11:30, Elsie heard footsteps toward the study. At midnight, Miss Carter heard a thud. The note arranged a meeting at midnight, and the diary speaks of a secret. The killer entered the study, argued with Sir Reginald, and struck him with the statuette. They opened the cabinet with a key, hid the amulet, and planted the key to suggest theft. Later, they placed Miss Carter's shoe to cast suspicion. He paused, his eyes gleaming. But the killer made mistakes. The scuff mark was too distinct, the shoe too convenient, and the note, its handwriting matches none in this room, for it was forged. The killer is not L, but someone who used L to mislead. A stunned silence followed. Poirot turned to Victor Crane, his voice sharp. Monsieur Crane, you are the journalist, always observing, always writing. Your notebook, it contains more than notes for an article. It contains Sir Reginald's secret, does it not? Crane's smirk vanished, his pen dropping. What are you implying, Poirot? I'm here to report, not to kill. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low. You were in your room, you said, but your balcony overlooks the study window. You saw Sir Reginald that night arguing with someone who threatened your plans. Sir Reginald had discovered your true purpose, an article exposing a scandal tied to the amulet and an old debt from his diplomatic days. You forged the note signed L to lure him to a meeting, knowing it would point to others. You entered the study, struck him, and staged the scene to look like a robbery. Crane's face paled, his voice rising. This is absurd. You have no proof. Poirot produced a small scrap of paper from his pocket, a draft of the note, found in Crane's room during a discreet search. This, monsieur, is your handwriting. The scuff mark matches your boots, which I examined this morning. The amulet, you hid it in your luggage, believing it would bolster your story of a cursed...
Stunned, signaled his men to search Crane's room. Moments later, they returned with the amulet, its golden surface glinting. Crane's defiance collapsed, his shoulders slumping as he was led away.
The room exhaled, the tension breaking. Clara sobbed, clinging to her mother. Warrender's face softened with relief, and Langston wiped his brow. Mrs. Langley's smile returned, though her eyes were thoughtful. Miss Carter, trembling, whispered, "It's over." Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "The trap, mon ami. It was not just for Crane, but for the truth. He believed himself clever, but no one outwits Hercule Poirot." As the guests dispersed, the weight of the mystery lifted, leaving Blackthorn Hall quieter, sadder, but free of its shadow. The truth had been revealed, and Poirot's genius had prevailed once more. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after Victor Crane's unmasking as Sir Reginald Thornhill's killer, Blackthorn Hall seemed to exhale, its oppressive atmosphere lightened by the resolution of the mystery. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a gentle glow across the estate's manicured lawns, as if nature itself acknowledged the return of order. Inside, however, the guests remained subdued, their faces etched with the lingering shock of betrayal. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the drawing-room, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The case was solved, yet the cost of truth weighed heavily on all who remained. Hercule Poirot, his small figure impeccable as ever, stood by the grand piano, his green eyes thoughtful as he surveyed the room. The guests had gathered one final time, their presence requested by Poirot before his departure. Lady Eleanor Thornhill sat with quiet dignity, her grief now tempered by understanding. Clara, beside her, held her mother's hand, her eyes still red but resolute. Julian Warrender, his charm restored but softened, stood near the window, gazing out at the gardens. Dr. Maurice Langston, his scholarly demeanour intact, adjusted his spectacles with a sigh. Mrs. Beatrice Langley, ever composed, sipped tea, while Miss Evelyn Carter, her companion, seemed to have regained a fragile calm. Inspector Grayson, though grudgingly impressed by Poirot's brilliance, hovered by the door, his notebook closed. Victor Crane was in custody, the amulet recovered, and the case officially closed, yet Poirot's final gathering suggested he had more to say. Hastings, ever loyal, stood by his friend, anticipating the reflective wisdom that often followed Poirot's triumphs. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice soft but resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "has unravelled them." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Yet, a case such as this is not merely about the crime, but about the human heart. Why does one man kill another? Not for gold, not for artifacts, but for fear. Fear of exposure, of ruin. Monsieur Crane sought to profit from Sir Reginald's past, a diplomatic indiscretion tied to the amulet, a secret Sir Reginald guarded fiercely. In his fear, Crane struck, believing he could outwit justice. But justice, it is patient, and it is precise. Lady Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. "Mr. Poirot, you've given us the truth, but at such a cost. Reginald's secrets, they were his burden, not ours. Why did he not confide in me?" Poirot's eyes softened. "Madame, men like Sir Reginald, they carry their burdens alone, believing it protects those they love. His silence was his shield, but also his downfall. The note signed L, a forgery by Crane, played on this silence, luring him to a fatal meeting." Clara, her voice steady despite her grief, asked, "But why the amulet? Why make it seem like a theft?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The amulet, mademoiselle, was a distraction. Crane knew its history, a relic tied to a scandal in Cairo, a bribe Sir Reginald accepted years ago. By hiding it, Crane hoped to suggest a thief, diverting suspicion from his true motive, to silence Sir Reginald before he could expose the article Crane was writing. Dr. Langston cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. I knew of the amulet's history, Mr. Poirot. I should have said more. I thought it was just a collector's dispute. Poirot nodded. Your silence, monsieur, was understandable, but it aided Crane's deception. The truth requires courage from us all. Mrs. Langley set down her teacup, her tone cool but respectful. You've done a remarkable thing, Mr. Poirot. But what now? This house, this family? It will never be the same. Poirot's gaze was steady. Madame, life, it is change. Blackthorn Hall will heal, as will those within it, if they choose truth over secrets. The past, it cannot be undone, but the future, it is yours to shape. Miss Carter, her voice barely audible, spoke up. I'm sorry about the shoe, Mr. Poirot. I was so frightened. I didn't know what to do. Poirot's expression was kind. Mademoiselle, your fear was honest. You endures.
Hastings nodded, struck by the simplicity of Poirot's philosophy.
You've done it again, Poirot. You saw what none of us could.
Poirot's smile was serene.
The little grey cells, Hastings. They see what the eyes cannot. Now, let us prepare to depart. Blackthorn Hall has no more secrets to yield.
With a final bow to the guests, Poirot gathered his valise, his departure as precise as his investigation. The guests watched in silence as he and Hastings stepped into the hall, their figures diminishing in the morning light. Lady Eleanor and Clara embraced, their bond strengthened by shared loss. Warrender lingered by the window, his gaze thoughtful. Langston returned to his books, seeking solace in knowledge. Mrs. Langley and Miss Carter exchanged a glance, their secrets, if any, remaining their own. As the hired car carried Poirot and Hastings away from Blackthorn Hall, the mansion receded into the distance, its towers standing resolute against the clearing sky. Hastings leaned back, his mind replaying the case. The note, the scuff mark, the diary, the amulet. It was all so intricate, Poirot, he said. How did you know it was Crane? Poirot adjusted his gloves, his voice calm. The details, mon ami. The handwriting of the note, it matched a draft in his room. The scuff mark, it was from his boots, not Miss Carter's delicate shoe. The amulet, hidden in his luggage, was his final mistake. But more than that, it was his motive. Greed for a scandal, fear of exposure. The human heart, it betrays itself. Hastings smiled, accustomed to Poirot's blend of modesty and pride. You're a marvel, Poirot. What's next? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Next, Hastings, we return to London, to the order of my apartment, the symmetry of my life. But the world, it is full of mysteries, and Hercule Poirot will always be ready. As the car wound through the Devon hills, Blackthorn Hall faded from view, its secrets laid bare, its tragedy resolved. The truth had been restored, and Poirot, ever the guardian of order, moved on to the next challenge, his little grey cells already alert for the shadows of human nature. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The departure of Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings from Blackthorn Hall left a palpable void in the grand mansion, as if the very walls exhaled in relief, yet mourned the turmoil that had unfolded within. The late morning sun bathed the estate in a soft golden light, its warmth a stark contrast to the lingering chill
of betrayal and loss. The guests, though freed from the shadow of suspicion, moved with the hesitancy of those still processing the
chandelier, the polished mahogany, the faint scent of lavender, seemed almost mocking in the aftermath of such a grim affair. He glanced at the remaining guests, noting their subdued interactions. Lady Eleanor Thornhill, her composure restored, but her eyes heavy with grief, spoke softly with Clara, who seemed to draw strength from her mother's presence. Julian Warrender, his charm tempered by the ordeal, stood by the window, his gaze distant. Dr. Maurice Langston, engrossed in a book, appeared to seek refuge in the familiar comfort of scholarship. Mrs. Beatrice Langley and Miss Evelyn Carter sat together, their usual dynamic of employer and companion softened by a shared exhaustion. Inspector Grayson had departed with Crane in custody, the amulet secured as evidence, leaving the house in a state of uneasy calm. Hastings, however, sensed that the story was not yet complete. Poirot had hinted at loose ends, threads of human nature that required one final examination before they could truly leave Blackthorn Hall behind. Poirot entered the room, his small figure radiating quiet authority. His suit was, as always, impeccable, his moustache perfectly groomed, but his green eyes carried a reflective depth that Hastings recognized as the prelude to one of his philosophical summations. Mes amis, Poirot began, addressing the gathered guests. The case of Sir Reginald's murder is closed. Yet I feel it necessary to speak once more before I depart. The truth, it is a mirror, reflecting not only the crime, but the hearts of those involved. Lady Eleanor looked up, her voice soft but steady. Mr. Poirot, you've given us justice, but it feels so hollow. Reginald is gone, and knowing why doesn't bring him back. Poirot nodded, his expression sympathetic. Madame, the truth, it does not heal the wound, but it allows the heart to mend. Sir Reginald's secret, a scandal from his past, tied to the amulet, was a burden he carried alone. Monsieur Crane exploited that burden, but you, his family, were not its cause. Clara's eyes glistened with tears. He was always so private, Mr. Poirot. If he'd told us, could we have saved him? Poirot's gaze was kind. Mademoiselle, the if is a heavy question, but it is not yours to bear. Your father's silence was his choice, born of love, perhaps, to shield you. The killer, he preyed on that silence, but you have broken it with your courage. Warrender, turning from the window, spoke with a rare sincerity. I misjudged sooner about the amulet, Mr. Poirot. My silence, it made things worse. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. Monsieur, silence is a choice, but it is not always a crime. Your knowledge of the amulet's history was a piece of the puzzle, but it was Crane who turned it into a weapon. Learn from this and speak when truth demands it. Mrs. Langley set down her teacup, her voice cool but respectful. You've unraveled a tangled web, Mr. Poirot. But what of the future? This house, these artifacts, will they ever be free of this stain? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Madame, a house is but stone and wood. It is the people within who give it life. The artifacts, they are treasures, but their value lies in the stories they tell, not the secrets they hide.
You, all of you, must choose to let the past rest. Miss Carter, her voice barely audible, spoke up. I was so frightened, Mr. Poirot. The shoe, the noise in the corridor. I thought I'd be blamed. Poirot's expression softened. Mademoiselle, your fear was honest, and your honesty aided the truth. The shoe was a cruel trick by Crane, but you emerged stronger for it. Courage, it grows in the heart that faces fear. Hastings, watching the exchange, marveled at Poirot's ability to balance justice with compassion. You've given them closure, Poirot, he said quietly as the guests began to disperse. But what about you? This case, it was a dark one. Poirot adjusted his tie, his voice reflective. Mon ami, every case is a mirror to the human soul. This one, it showed greed, fear, and betrayal, but also love, loyalty, and courage. The little grey cells, they solve the crime, but it is the heart that understands it. They stepped into the hall, where the butler, Hargreaves, waited to see them off. Thank you, sir, he said to Poirot, his voice thick with emotion. Sir Reginald was a good man, for all his secrets. You've done right by him. Poirot bowed slightly. Monsieur Hargreaves, it is my duty to restore order. Serve this house well, and it will heal. As they boarded the hired car, Blackthorn Hall loomed behind them, its towers softened by the morning light. Hastings glanced back, the weight of the case lingering. Do you think they'll be all right, Poirot? Clara, Lady Eleanor, the others? Poirot's smile was serene. They will twinkled. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see chaos. The boots match the scuff mark. The handwriting betrayed Crane's forgery, and the motive, greed and fear, revealed his heart. It is simple, when one observes. Hastings chuckled. Simple for you, perhaps. What's next, then? Back to London for a quiet cup of tisane? Poirot's laugh was soft but bright. Oui, Hastings. A tisane. And perhaps a new mystery. The world, it is never short of secrets for Hercule Poirot to uncover. As the car carried them away, Blackthorn Hall stood silent, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. The echoes of truth lingered, a testament to Poirot's genius and the enduring power of his little grey cells. Chapter 13. The Lingering Shadows. The journey back to London was well underway, the rolling Devon hills giving way to the familiar hum of the countryside. But Blackthorn Hall's shadow lingered in Captain Arthur Hastings' mind. The resolution of Sir Reginald Thornhill's murder had brought justice, yet the emotional echoes of the case reverberated, stirring questions about the human cost of secrets. Hercule Poirot, seated beside him in the hired car, seemed unperturbed, his small, neat figure a picture of calm satisfaction. His green eyes, however, held a reflective glint, as if the case's complexities still occupied his formidable intellect. Hastings glanced at his friend, breaking the comfortable silence. Poirot, you've solved the mystery, but I can't help feeling there's more to it. The guests, Clara, Lady Eleanor, even Warrender, they're all left to pick up the pieces. Do you ever wonder what happens after we leave? Poirot adjusted his gloves, his voice thoughtful. Mon ami, the aftermath, it is not for Hercule Poirot to control. My task is to restore order, to bring the truth to light. What follows, the healing, the rebuilding, that is for those who remain.
But you are right, Hastings. The shadows of a crime, they linger long after the culprit is caught. The car slowed as they approached a small village, its quaint cottages a stark contrast to Blackthorn Hall's grandeur. Poirot's gaze drifted to the passing scenery, his mind clearly elsewhere. The case of Sir Reginald, he continued. It was not merely about a murder, but about the fragility of trust. Each guest, they carried their own secrets, their own fears. Crane's greed was the spark, but the tinder was already there. Distrust, hidden motives, unspoken loves. Hastings nodded, his thoughts returning to the drawing room's tense gatherings. Clara's confession about the argument she overheard.
Silences. Lady Eleanor's fear, Langston's reticence, Mrs. Langley's guardedness. Even Miss Carter, with her trembling honesty, played her part. The truth, it is a mirror, and none can look away forever. They paused at a roadside inn for tea, the car's driver grateful for the break. The inn was cozy, its low beams and crackling fire a welcome respite. As they settled at a small table, Hastings ventured another question. What about the amulet, Poirot? Was it really just a distraction? Or did it mean more to Sir Reginald than we know? Poirot sipped his tea, his expression thoughtful. The amulet, Hastings, it was both a symbol and a tool. To Sir Reginald, it was a reminder of a past mistake, a bribe accepted in Cairo, a moment of weakness that haunted him. To Crane, it was leverage, a way to craft his scandalous article. By hiding it, Crane sought to muddy the waters, to make us believe in a thief. But the amulet's true power was in what it represented, a secret worth killing for. Hastings frowned, stirring his tea. And the note, signed L? It was so clever of Crane to forge it. He nearly had us chasing ghosts. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Oui, the note was his masterstroke, but also his downfall. The handwriting, it was too perfect, too unlike any in the house. When I found the draft in his room, it confirmed his deceit. The little grey cells, Hastings, they notice what others overlook. The inn's warmth contrasted with the chill of the case's memory. Hastings leaned back, his mind drifting to the guests. Warrender and Clara. Do you think they'll make it, after all this? Sir Reginald's disapproval was so strong. Poirot set down his cup, his voice soft. Love, mon ami, it is resilient, but it requires truth. Monsieur Warrender's intentions, they are sincere, despite his flaws. Mademoiselle Clara, she is young, but her heart is strong. If they are honest with each other, they will find their way. Sir Reginald's shadow, it will fade in time. And Lady Eleanor? Hastings asked. She's lost so much. Poirot's gaze was distant. Madame Thornhill, she is a woman of strength, though she does not yet know it. Her grief, it is profound, but she has Clara, and together they will rebuild. The truth, it has freed her from the burden of secrets. As they finished their tea and returned to the car, Hastings felt a sense of closure settling over him, though questions lingered. What about Mrs. Langley and Miss Carter? They were so enigmatic. Do you think they were hiding something more? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Madame Langley, she is a woman of many layers. Gold. Hastings leaned back, his thoughts turning to Poirot's methods. You always say it's the little things, Poirot. The scuff mark, the petal, the handwriting. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's understanding people. Poirot's laugh was soft, almost musical. You begin to understand, Hastings. The clues, they are important, but it is the human heart that tells the story.
Crane's greed, Clara's loyalty, Lady Eleanor's silence. They are the true puzzle. The little grey cells, they see the pattern, but it is the soul that reveals the why. As they neared London, the city's familiar skyline emerging on the horizon, Hastings felt a pang of nostalgia for Blackthorn Hall, despite its darkness. It was a grim case, Poirot, but you brought light to it. Do you ever tire of it? The secrets, the lies? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Never, mon ami. The world, it is full of disorder, but Hercule Poirot, he brings order. Each case, it is a challenge, a dance of intellect and intuition. And with you by my side, Hastings, it is never dull. The car slowed as they entered the city. The bustle of London a stark contrast to the quiet of Devon. Blackthorn Hall was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. Yet the echoes of truth lingered, a reminder of Poirot's genius and the enduring complexity of the human heart. As they approached Poirot's apartment, Hastings knew that whatever mysteries lay ahead, his friend's little grey cells would be ready, ever vigilant, ever precise. Chapter 14. The Unseen Motives. The London skyline loomed closer as the hired car carried Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings toward the heart of the city. The rolling hills of Devon, now a distant memory. The resolution of Sir Reginald Thornhill's murder at Blackthorn Hall had restored order. Yet Hastings found his thoughts returning to the mansion's shadowed corridors and the guests left to grapple with their altered lives. The case, though solved, had left behind a tapestry of human motives and emotions that lingered in his mind, demanding further reflection. Poirot, seated beside him, seemed serene, his green eyes fixed on the passing streets, but Hastings knew his friend's mind was never truly at rest. Poirot, Hastings ventured, breaking the quiet hum of the car. You've tied up the case neatly, as always, but I keep thinking about the others. Langston, Mrs. Langley, Miss Carter. Were they really just bystanders, or did they know more than they let on? Poirot adjusted his hat, his voice measured. Mon ami, you seek the...
You were so nervous about the amulet. Could he have been involved in Sir Reginald's past? That scandal in Cairo? Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. The good doctor, he is a man of knowledge, not deceit. His interest in the amulet was genuine, scholarly, but tinged with guilt. He knew of its history, a bribe from Sir Reginald's diplomatic days, and perhaps suspected its significance, but he lacked the courage to speak fully. His silence was a fault, not a crime. And Mrs. Langley? Hastings pressed. She was so composed, so protective of Miss Carter, it felt deliberate, as if she were hiding something. Poirot nodded, his gaze thoughtful. Madame Langley, she is a woman of secrets, but not of murder. Her composure, it is a shield, protecting not only herself, but Mademoiselle Carter. Their bond, it is deeper than employer and companion. Perhaps a shared past, a loyalty unspoken. But it is not tied to Sir Reginald's death. Poirot, he does not pry where the crime does not demand. Hastings leaned back, his thoughts turning to Miss Carter's trembling confession. And Miss Carter's shoe. That was a cruel trick by Crane. She was so frightened, but she came forward in the end. Oui, Poirot said, his voice softening. Mademoiselle Carter. She's the innocent caught in a storm. Her fear made her a target for Crane's deception, but her honesty, it helped unmask him.
the shoe, the scuff mark. They were tools of misdirection, but her heart spoke too.
The car slowed as they entered London's bustling streets, the city's energy a stark contrast to Blackthorn Hall's sombre elegance. Hastings glanced at Poirot, struck by his friend's ability to see beyond the surface.
You always say it's the little things, Poirot. The petal, the handwriting, the boots, but it's more than that. You see the people, their reasons, their fears.
Poirot's eyes twinkled.
Précisément, Hastings. The clues, they are the map, but the human heart, it is the journey. Crane's greed, Clara's loyalty, Lady Eleanor's grief, they are the true story. The little grey cells, they find the path, but it is the understanding of human nature that leads to the truth.
As they approached Poirot's apartment, Hastings felt a pang of curiosity about the future.
What happens to Blackthorn Hall now, Poirot? Will Lady Eleanor and Clara stay, with all those memories?
Poirot's expression was reflective.
The Hall, it is a place of beauty and...
Acted alone, Poirot? Or was there someone else pulling strings we didn't see? Poirot paused on the steps, his gaze distant.
A good question, mon ami. Crane, he was the hand that struck, driven by his own greed. But the scandal, it touched others. Sir Reginald's past, it cast a long shadow. If there were others, their roles were silent, their motives hidden in the folds of history. For now, the truth we have is enough. Inside, Poirot's apartment was a haven of symmetry. Polished furniture, neatly arranged books, a faint scent of lavender. As Hastings settled into a chair, Poirot poured 2 cups of tisane, the ritual a quiet celebration of their return. To order, Hastings, Poirot said, raising his cup, and to the truth which restores it.
Hastings smiled, clinking his cup against Poirot's. To your little grey cells, Poirot. They never fail. Poirot's laugh was soft, almost musical. They are tireless, mon ami, but they are nothing without the heart that guides them. The case of Blackthorn Hall, it was a dance of motives, greed, fear, love, loyalty. We have seen them all, and we have prevailed. As they sipped their tisane, the city hummed outside, its rhythm a reminder of life's endless complexities. Blackthorn Hall was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its shadows softened by the light of truth. Yet Hastings knew that somewhere another mystery awaited, another challenge for Poirot's genius. For now, though, the world was in order, and the little Belgian detective was content, his mind already turning to the next dance of human nature. Chapter 15. The Final Curtain. The soft glow of evening settled over London as Hercule Poirot's apartment embraced its familiar order, a sanctuary of symmetry and calm after the turmoil of Blackthorn Hall. The case of Sir Reginald Thornhill's murder had been resolved, Victor Crane unmasked as the killer, yet the echoes of the mystery lingered in Captain Arthur Hastings' mind. Seated in Poirot's impeccably arranged sitting room, with its polished furniture and faint scent of lavender, Hastings sipped a final cup of tisane, his thoughts drifting back to the Devon estate and the lives forever altered by the truth. Poirot, opposite him, adjusted a silver cigarette case with meticulous care, his green eyes reflective but serene, as if savouring the case's conclusion. Poirot, Hastings began, setting down his cup. It's over, but I can't shake the feeling that Blackthorn Hall will never be the same. You brought justice, but what about peace? For Clara, Lady Eleanor, the others. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled, his voice soft but resonant. Mon ami, peace, it is not the gift of Hercule. Nodded, his mind replaying the case's intricate threads, the forged note, signed L,
The scuff mark, the hidden amulet, the diary's cryptic entries. You saw it all so clearly, Poirot. The boots, the handwriting, Crane's motive. But what was it about this case that felt so personal? It wasn't just a murder, was it? Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile, his gaze distant. You perceive well, Hastings. The murder of Sir Reginald, it was not merely a crime of greed, but of intimacy. Crane's motive, his article, his fear of exposure, was personal, yes, but so too was Sir Reginald's silence. His past, the scandal in Cairo, it was a wound he hid from those he loved. The amulet, it was not just a relic, but a symbol of his shame. The killer struck at the heart of that shame, and in doing so, exposed the fragility of trust. Hastings frowned, stirring his tisane absently. And the others, Warrender, Langston, Mrs. Langley, they were all caught up in it, weren't they? Their secrets, their fears, they fed the mystery. Précisément, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. Each guest, they carried a piece of the puzzle. Monsieur Warrender's love for Clara, it was sincere, but shadowed by Sir Reginald's disapproval. Dr. Langston's silence, it was born of scholarly caution, not malice. Madame Langley and Mademoiselle Carter, their bond, it hints at a story untold, but not one of murder. The little grey cells, they see the motives, but it is the heart that understands their weight. The room fell quiet, the ticking of a clock the only sound. Hastings glanced at the window, where London's lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. What about Crane? In custody now, facing justice. Do you think he regretted it, Poirot? Killing to protect his story. Poirot's expression grew sombre. Regret, mon ami. It is a luxury for those who reflect. Crane, he was consumed by greed, by the power of his pen. He saw Sir Reginald's secret as a prize, not a burden. When they confronted him, his defiance, it was not remorse, but fear of ruin. The heart that kills for gain, it rarely regrets until the end. Hastings leaned back, struck by Poirot's insight. You always see the why, don't you? Not just the who or the how. It's what sets you apart. Poirot's smile was modest, though his eyes sparkled with pride. The why, Hastings, it is the soul of the mystery. The clues, the note, the scuff mark, the amulet, they are the body. But the motive, it is the breath. Without it, there is no life to the case. Hercule Poirot, he seeks the truth in all its parts. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was already. You're tireless, Poirot. Poirot's laugh was soft, almost musical. The little grey cells, they do not rest, mon ami. But for tonight, we have earned our repose. The case of Blackthorn Hall, it is complete. The truth, it has been served. As the valet withdrew, Hastings rose, stretching. What will become of Blackthorn Hall, do you think? Will Clara and Lady Eleanor stay, or will they leave it behind? Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where the city's lights glowed like stars. The Hall, it is a place of memory, of beauty and pain. Lady Eleanor, she will decide with time. Perhaps she will stay, to honor her husband's legacy, or leave to escape its weight. Mademoiselle Clara, with Monsieur Warrender, they may forge a new path, one of hope. The future, it is theirs to shape. Hastings smiled, warmed by Poirot's optimism. You've given them a chance, Poirot. That's more than justice. It's a gift. Poirot bowed his head, his voice soft. It is my purpose, Hastings, to bring order where there is chaos, light where there is shadow. Blackthorn Hall, it will heal, as all things do, with time and truth. The evening deepened, the city's hum a gentle backdrop to their conversation. Hastings gathered his coat, preparing to leave, but paused at the door. "Until the next mystery, then." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Until the next, mon ami. The world, it is full of secrets, and Hercule Poirot, he is always ready." As Hastings stepped into the cool London night, Blackthorn Hall seemed a world away, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to mend. The case had been a dance of deception, but Poirot's genius had brought down the final curtain, revealing the truth in all its clarity. Somewhere, another mystery waited, but for now, the little Belgian detective was content, his little grey cells at rest, until the next call to order.